let's kick this off for everyone listening and watching. We have Eric Min, co-founder and CEO of Zwift on the show. And Eric, I can't tell you how much of a pleasure it is to have you here with us. And I've got a little bit of backstory here, so I'm gonna be effusive and put some praise on you and your company here. You know, the first thing I wanted to say is that I feel like for the last 15 years, 20 years, every tech founder has wanted to change the lives of users. And I can tell you firsthand, as obviously a huge fan of Zwift, but a new dad, the capabilities of your platform as an avid cyclist, what I can complete within, an hour. I can race people all over the world. I can get a team of my friends together to race other teams all over the world. What I can do within an hour is just mind-blowing when I consider what I was doing before you guys started 10 years ago, which was nothing like that. So I just wanted to thank you for that first and foremost. And then the second thing I wanted to share was just how this interview came about. And it's really special. So a mutual friend and connection of ours, Nick Weber, he was one of my first interview. He was my first interview. Fantastic show, really crazy story that he's got. Check it out. He basically suffered a heart attack as a 22-year-old and then built a company around it. So great story. But he was like, who would be great on the show is Eric Min. Like, I'll put you in touch. And I was like, we are not far along enough. We are way too small. Not a big enough name for Eric to join us. So fast forward, a year, and you had popped up on the Breakfast Club Slack, and I reached out, and we struck up this conversation, and sure enough, not too much longer afterwards, you've agreed to join us. So Eric Min, very long introduction. Thank you for joining us.
Yeah, thank you for having me, Nick. I mean, I've known him for almost 10 years now. So that is a fantastic story. He's an entrepreneur, right?
To say the least. Yeah. So, man, I'm so excited. Like, as you can tell, I'm a true Zwift fan, and I just believe in the product and the platform and the community. So, I usually on Hill Climbers, we dive into some more personal touches about your background. Here's what I'll say. There's been some incredible podcasts about you and about Zwift, one of which was the Escape Collective one that I listened to not too long ago. I really encourage folks to learn more about you and the kind of founding of the company, to listen to some of those. I'm so excited just to talk about what's going on with Zwift a little bit more contemporaneously. My first question here is, you have this background at JP Morgan Chase, right, on Wall Street, and then you founded a trading technology platform. So my question is, coming from that, which is so different from building and the first online virtual cycling hub, how did you confidently take that leap from that first company to Zwift?
I think I joined JP Morgan because it was a safe job to take. I'm from New York City, so working at JP Morgan was a prestigious place to be in whatever capacity. So I happened to land in a department that focused on trading, the trading floor. And so the job that I developed was all around building trading systems for specifically the commodities desk. So I wouldn't say I had passion for that business, but what I did learn was how to become a professional. I had to learn and how to manage a team. And when we realized, my partner and I, after spending 8 years helping them to build technology around their trading systems, is that, wait a sec, we were supporting vendors and implementing their systems on our. We also build our own systems for JP Morgan. We thought, wait a sec, we could do this ourselves. Why are we doing this for JP Morgan? And so we, after some thinking about is it worth taking the risk? And we were young enough that if it didn't work out, we would go back to another Wall Street firm. So that was the beginning of us venturing into starting a new business. But again, it was very similar to what we were doing. except what we were building was building something on the cloud. So a trading system, enterprise trading system on the cloud. Then this is when cloud wasn't very big. It was very new. They called it a SaaS
Yeah.
business, right? They don't use the SaaS term anymore. Software as a service. That's what it used to be known as. So this company called Sakana Technology, where we built trading systems for hedge funds and banks and energy companies, that allowed us to learn like how to raise capital, how to build a team, how to build a product, and how to sell the product, how to service the customer, how to collect money, and how to make money. So we spent a decade like learning how to build a business. And so were we passionate about what we were doing? No. No, it was still like we're missing that piece. I was certainly.
Right.
And so when that came to an end, it was how can I apply all the things I learned at JP Morgan and more recently at Sakana Technology into something that I actually cared about. And so at that point, we had made enough money where we could pick and choose what we wanted to do. And we were too young to retire. We didn't have enough money to retire, so we thought, we started to explore different ideas and different industries. In fact, the last thing I wanted to do was to do anything to do with my hobby, because I was a lifelong, cycling enthusiast, and I raced bikes as a kid. I was still, riding and training with my friends. I mean, this was my world. So the last thing I wanted to do was anything about, cycling. But I did look at education. I looked at health care. I looked at. Then I started thinking, well, what about one idea we had was what if we made it really easy for business travelers to have access to something like the Rafa Club, right? Where you have access to bikes, so you don't have to travel with the bikes. I used to travel all over the world with my bike and a trainer. It was crazy what I was doing. But that was logistically, it was very expensive. It couldn't scale. We just didn't see how this would be a viable business, so we shut that down. But I was living in London, and I was riding indoors because it was just so hard. I had 3 kids, and you know the story. Like I could not disappear for hours and hours as I used to.
You know what? I've never heard you talk about parenthood being one of the motivating factors of that. I didn't know that. And it makes a lot of sense. I'm living it every day.
Well,
So
well,
yeah.
we had children late, so we had 3 children. It's like bam, 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 right? And it just it felt wrong for me to tell my wife I'm disappearing for 4 hours to go for a bike ride. So I didn't even ask. I just rode indoors whenever I could. And
Yeah.
so I spent a lot of time during when I was living in London, looking at all the different products to just entertain me, to engage me, because what I had left in New York City was this community of cyclists who I trained with, I competed with, I socialized with. I left that community, and I didn't realize what I had left behind. When I went to London, it's not so easy to just recreate that. It took years for me to build that community that I was part of. So
And some
what
of
came?
some of the irony, I've paid attention to kind of the founder story, and the
Yeah,
irony is that you left New York where you can't really ride outside all year long. I mean you can on a winter where it's warm enough, you can ride
yeah,
outside. But the irony is that I think Zwift was inspired by your rides in Central Park and the access
yeah.
you had in Central Park. And it's interesting that you go to London, which is also, there's going to be a huge cycling community, but you couldn't duplicate that. So yeah.
The closest park where you could do proper riding was Richmond Park, which was about 20 minutes away. So, I would waste 40 minutes out of my hour and a half of training commuting to and from a park. It just didn't make any sense. I had to get as much as I could in an hour or 90 minutes. But the Central Park thing it was incredible. I would wake up at 3:30 in the morning. I could get in like 2 to 3 hour ride before showing up at work, which is amazing. Of course, I was very tired in the afternoon, but
What time were you going to sleep? I have to ask.
I mean, I wasn't sleeping very much, to be honest, but like, by
Wow,
10
three because
o'clock. So I was, yeah,
yeah,
yeah, I was young.
a lot of you'll hear a lot of entrepreneurs say they wake up early, but 3:30 might take the cake, man. That's hardcore.
But to ride, yeah. And I remember
Yeah,
looking out my kitchen window, like checking the temperature in Central Park. That's how close I was.
3:30. Yeah, I mean,
Yeah,
God,
yeah, yeah.
wow,
But
unreal.
this is New York City. So I did a lot of training, and the bike races start at like 5:30 in the morning. So you need to get up very early. But you could be having brunch with your family by 10 o'clock. So it was
Right.
just like the perfect setup. And I missed all of that. So that was, just having that convenience, the concept of having a community was a big driver for wanting to try to recreate that, virtually, even if it only satisfied 70% of the real experience. The idea that I would be around with other people, I figured if we can crack that code, that there would be other people like me with children and busy, professional lives where you could just find, everyone could find an hour in a day, but any hour, you could just drop in and have a great experience. That I thought was even better in many ways, like than Central Park.
And
So
fast
yeah,
forward to present day, and that is
yeah,
literally what I do. I open the companion app, and I have
yeah,
an hour. And granted, some races are more well attended than others, but I can usually
yeah,
within an hour and a half pick a pretty well attended race and get it in. And the Zwift races
yeah.
are 50
I
minutes max.
I don't know how I don't know if you have this experience, but when I was a kid and I had this Tuesday, Thursday evening, training rides, and if it rained unexpectedly, it would just ruin my evening. And back
Mhm.
then we wouldn't say, "Well, let's jump on a trainer." You just wouldn't ride.
Yeah,
Today you have absolutely no excuse. If
yeah,
you want to ride, you should be able to do that at home. You can ride outdoors, of course, if you can, but you have absolutely no excuse to not ride because you can do that indoors, and you can do all sorts of things. You can race, you can do a social ride, you can train, you can explore. So
yeah.
yeah, it's
And did
changed
you?
my life.
Yeah, that's the theme of the show today. I think when you guys were starting it, did you envision that racing would be so popular, or did you think it would be more just kind of you show up in this virtual world and you just ride?
I didn't really think too much about how big racing would be versus, training versus just exploring. Those were the three obvious experiences. Um, I didn't really think about it, but I did know that racing would happen. It's just human nature,
Hmm.
right? Certainly people would be chasing segments just like they do in
Right.
Strava. But the racing part, we kind of learned through the community, and this
Hmm.
is before we had any event features. The community would show up and they would come up with their own rules about the races. And,
So
we,
I had Eric
yeah,
Schlange, the
yeah,
Zwift Insider, on the show, and he
yeah,
was there from pretty early days and would say, yeah,
yeah,
back then it was like a meetup. You just, it's 4 p.m.
yeah.
Everyone agrees to show up at the same time, and then you race, and there was no tech infrastructure or organizing it. So
There
man,
was a
what a great
spreadsheet.
way to lead product.
Yeah,
It's like incredible.
yeah. They had a spreadsheet that they'd email around. That's how they organized events back then.
Right.
So it's come a
I
long way.
Another thing that I like thinking about is how Zwift and e-racing and riding is still kind of early days and early innings. And one of the reasons I have this thought is that I've been the one in my friend group to encourage others to race and do ZRL with me. Excuse me, Zwift Race League on
Yeah.
Tuesday nights. And I think it's still early days because I don't think a lot of folks that are serious cyclists that are crit racers, etc. I don't think a lot of them use Zwift to the maximum potential, and I don't think a lot of them have even had someone like me who's pushed them over and said, "Hey, you got to do this." And
Yeah.
to your point earlier, you cannot. You can't disregard, you can't discount the fitness that you can get from doing this. Like
Oh,
when you get incredible
it,
repetitions of this fitness.
Here's my theory about bike racers and why some of them have reservations about being on Zwift. I think they're just concerned that they'll get beaten. And I think they will be beaten because it does require certain craft, right? It's not like outdoor
Yeah,
racing, and so I think they're a little bit concerned. It's an ego thing.
that's hilarious. That is
Yeah,
because I think we all have those friends. We all and I've been hosting a weekly group ride in real life
yeah,
here in Austin, and I think there is a barrier for folks that are really competitive, that are
yeah.
type A. You know, it's
Yep.
it's a hilly route, and we race it. It's inspired by my time in LA doing all the group rides that you and I have talked about a little bit. And folks are just apprehensive to get over the hump and
I think they're
set their
intimidated.
ego aside. I really think it's a barrier to entry. I totally agree with you.
Yeah, I think what we're seeing is just a lot of new cyclists trying racing for the first time. And one of the beautiful things about a virtual environment is that you can literally onboard someone, and in the first week they could do a first race. Right? Think about what it would take to someone from buying a bike at a bike shop to entering their first event. It would take at least a year, at least. That would be early, right? On Zwift, you
And
could get that
you
done
could
in
be
one
like
week.
me and you could get in your first crit race and break your collarbone. So there you go.
Yeah,
That'll set
yeah.
you back
There's
even
that.
further. So my
Yeah.
wife really appreciates Zwift, Eric, for some of those reasons. Yeah.
Yeah, no, I do see crashes out there, and it still happens. And for me, I can't race more than once or twice a week because they are hard. They are hard, and you want to do well, right? Because there are plenty of just rides that you could do where you can go hard, but if you want to race, you want to be somewhat prepared. So I am definitely picky about which race I want to do.
Totally, yeah. And by the way, again, shout out Eric Schlange, who's innovating with his tiny races.
Oh, they're
That's
hard.
a good one if you're gonna pick one for the week. So I don't know, just a tangent
Don't
here. It's
don't.
four
Yeah.
races that are 6 or 7 kilometers on the quarter hour mark. So you get four. It's kind of similar to a track racing where you can get four kind of sprints in within the hour.
Yeah, don't think that short races are easy. I think in many ways are harder,
Exactly.
really hard. Not much
And
recovery,
you
and it's all out.
Yeah, it'll whip you into shape. So I think sort of on this topic, I just wanted to ask you point blank, for those racers or just an average kind of weekend warrior or any cyclist, like, in your words these days, what do you think folks are missing by not being on Zwift? I mean, what do you think right now the value is to be Zwifting every week?
I think so. The way I think about Zwifting, and I Zwift year round, and for me, it's not even about the weather. It's about time and convenience and the experience that I want. So if I want to race, there's no easier place to do that than on a virtual platform in the comfort of your home. If you want to train, I always find that when I ride more outdoors, my fitness goes down. It's
Hmm.
because when I after the summer, I come back onto Zwift and I realize how much fitness I've lost because the races are so freaking hard. And and I get back into shape in the wintertime because I spend more time. A lot of it is around threshold training, and it's
Mhm.
just easier to do that, on Zwift than outdoors. But I think for people, it's just a great way to get introduced into racing because it's not just about going hard. There's tactics involved. I think for a new entrant, I think team time trial events are probably really awesome. Takes a little bit of pressure off because you're not going to win or lose by yourself. You're doing that with a team, and you're going as fast as the slowest person. So I think a great way to introduce someone into racing is start with a team time trial.
Really
And we
fun,
probably,
super super
yeah,
fun.
yeah,
Agreed.
yeah. And you could be on Discord. You could be talking to your teammates. I think we've also talked about introducing the idea of a tandem race, right? Having two people on a tandem, and there's some things that we have to work out from a product perspective. But I think it's universally agreed that like tandem would be amazing, right? You can have anyone be part of your team. And so I think that that's another great way to introduce people into this whole notion of competition and training for the competition. And so I think look, training, competition, all of this cycle is about keeping people engaged and just keep coming back for more, and having the concept of seasons, right?
Yeah. It's addictive. It really it hooks you. And part of I think part of that comes down to your motivation, which is, can you get the workout? Can you get the endorphin boost in a relatively short period
Yeah,
of time?
yeah,
And the answer is yes. So then when you've got the window when the baby's sleeping or whatever, you can jump in there and get it in. So
yeah. I can
I
tell
think
you
that's
that winning a race in your in your home, in your garage, or in your basement, you have this high that you would have in a real bike race. It's the same.
yeah.
People get so excited about those triumphs.
And
And
I
look, let's
think
not forget why we're doing this is to stay fit, right? And try to have a healthy lifestyle and live longer, live healthier, and longer life. And there's we forget about the benefits of all that. I think there's just a lot of stories about people losing weight or becoming healthier or dealing with major illnesses, and how
mm,
exercise and anything that we can do to encourage that is helping them live a better life.
yeah, and two things come to mind. Let's see if I can actually remember them. One is that we were questioning why people haven't jumped on, and I think it's hard for people to wrap their mind around that the proxy virtual metaverse world that you guys have
Mm.
created can be 70, 80, 90% as high quality as the experience of doing it outside. And what I think is just amazing is, for me, that is the case. Like I can get a very comparable experience in my shed, in my backyard. And I did remember the second thing I was going to say, which is that right now I'm an A racer. A lot of times I'm a B racer. But what is arguably the most impressive thing about the platform is that the biggest number of racers are in C and D, like by far.
Yeah,
So
yeah,
you can be at the very beginning of your journey. You can have not the best cycling fitness, and that is the most popular segment in Zwift racing right now, which I think is, hats off to you for getting folks in that category
yeah.
that aren't, the studs. Folks that aren't the fastest are racing, and it's awesome.
Yeah. I mean, we have, I think, close to 40,000 people taking part in ZRL. I mean, it's a lot of
Mm.
people, right? A lot of divisions,
Yeah,
and the vast majority of them will be category D and C, which makes
right.
sense. It's a bit of a pyramid. And hats off to you, because it is hard to become a category A. That requires incredible talent, fitness, and real hard work to sustain that.
So we were talking about the team time trial, and that ZRL second round kicked off this week. And I somewhat jokingly said, "Hey guys, it would be great if we didn't come in last." So we get in the time trial, and we didn't come in last, and I'm all excited, and then I get a text message from one of my teammates saying that the team in last got DQ'd. So we were not last because the last team was disqualified. So yeah, I mean there are levels to it, Eric. There's 5 watts per kilogram, and then there's 4 watts per kilogram. So man, we're just having so much fun. And it's not about, for us, it's not about being the best. It's about the competing aspect. So
Yeah, and what's really funny is in the beginning, people were just not believing the performance of
oh my God, there's some
of the
studs on
riders.
there.
And I think people get confused. Just because you're the fastest guy in your little town, you're now competing with the world, right? On a global scale. Of course, you're going to find people with incredible talents,
Yeah,
and there are
and
many.
Right. It's yeah, and if you listen to Zwift content, you hear that all the time. It's like, hey man, like just because people are faster than you doesn't mean they're cheating, right? It's
That's
like,
right. That's right.
right,
That's right.
yeah,
That's right. I mean, it's a much smaller sample set in your little town compared to
right.
what you get on Zwift these days.
So I think this is a great time to ask you about the state of Zwift. You guys are celebrating
Yeah.
your 10-year anniversary, and one
Yeah.
of the things that you had mentioned to me when we chatted for the pre-interview was you mentioned a couple times getting back to the basics, and I
Yeah.
wanted to understand what you meant by that. What does that mean to you, and what does that mean for
Yeah.
Zwift and your initiatives?
Yeah, I mean, we all went through a crazy ride with COVID. Um, and like many other digital businesses, when we got into COVID, our business just went through the roof, which is great for the business and great for Zwift because we had invested in infrastructure leading up to that. So when we doubled our business, like literally like overnight, we our priority was like keep the lights on. Let's make sure that we can accommodate everyone who's trying to get into Zwift. This was during a period when mostly Europeans were not just allowed to go outside. They're,
Yeah.
the only time Europeans could go outside was to get food, or like they were allowed to exercise, and for a very short period of time. It was a lockdown in Europe. So there was a period where everyone with all sorts of equipment was showing up on Zwift, and our priority was to make sure that they could get in their Zwift session. So that was crazy. We probably had we had been growing steadily, and that just doubled our business in a very very short period of time. And that also happened to coincide with when we were raising more capital. We then went on
Well,
to
that's good
uh,
timing, right? A little
it, I
silver
yeah,
lining with
it
COVID.
was yeah,
It's good when
exactly.
it's going up and you're raising capital and not going the other
I mean,
way, right?
honestly, when COVID happened, I had no idea what would happen to the business. We just no one did, and I'd be lying if I told you we would, we would double our business. I mean, so we were surprised like many other businesses, and then of course we then raised capital. And then what do you do with capital? A company, a software company, you invest in people to scale up to the demands. So we had probably unrealistic demand forecasts, and so we over invested. And then, of course, after 2 years or a year and a half, the world started to come back to what it was before, right? And people started to go back to gyms, and then we saw the demand drop. And I think what happened with like many other businesses, we just pulled forward a lot of demand. And so we had a couple of periods of restructuring where we, trying to figure out what's the right size for the business and the right amount of investment we need to make. And I think we finally figured that out. It was painful. It was very painful and
Hmm.
very disruptive for the people who left, the people who stayed, and it's not something that I wish on any other entrepreneur or business CEO. But I think we're finally through that, and now we're at a place where okay, we understand the business is more predictable. We know what the demand looks like going forward. We can project it more conservatively, and now the business is in a great place.
Hmm.
So that took us a while. We went for a
Yeah.
ride, but the
Well,
business is very
thanks
healthy.
for being candid and sharing that. I
Yeah,
mean, needless to say, a lot of cycling brands are in the headlines and not in the best way. So it's
yeah,
important to have you guys around. And yeah, it's good
yeah,
to hear that you ironed out some of the wrinkles. And I think this
yeah,
is actually a good transition to talk about Zwift Ride, the hardware that you guys launched
yeah,
not too long ago over the summer. And this is, I think, a fascinating initiative that you took because it takes out the barrier to entry of people that are not
yeah,
gearheads, not gear aficionados. All of
yeah,
a sudden, you can really, in 5 steps, jump on Zwift in a in a very meaningful way, this initiative just feels like a no-brainer across the board. But then with this, do you plan to start competing a little bit more with Peloton and folks that are, I guess, a little bit more casual spin cyclists,
Mm.
as opposed to the roadies like us who get on to race,
Yeah.
etc.
So we had started to work on a more expensive bike, and we decided to can that project. We were pretty well into that project. We
Mm,
decided to can it because we thought the price point was too high. The market had shifted, and so we decided, let's figure out how to get to a product that is more affordable. I mean, the real one of our board members said, like, you need a $500 bike. So that was a test. And of course, $500 bike is just not possible given the kind of quality and the experience that we want to offer. But we landed at a $1,300 product, which still is a fraction of what the market was offering. And the reason we got into the hardware business is it's just an onboarding tool for us. Like, ultimately, we're a software company, we're a subscription business, and we didn't see the innovation that we wanted for our new customers. I think there was just a limited number of customers who were going to buy really, really expensive hardware. Now we were starting to onboard customers who might have spent $1,000 on a bike. Well, someone who buys $1,000 bike is not going to spend $1,000 on an indoor trainer. So we needed
and
to
this comes up
innovate around
in
price.
this comes up in the interviews all the time. More
Yeah.
times than not, folks share about buying their first carbon fiber bike, and it's like a dagger in their they're like, oh my god, spending $2,000 on a bike was so crazy. And I think you forget that as you become a cyclist and all your bikes cost more and more and more.
Yeah.
Like
Yeah.
that barrier to entry is huge.
It is, and
Yeah,
look, you can get a very affordable bike out there for $1,500 now, right?
yeah.
So we're just trying to figure out how to have products that, on a relative basis, is affordable. So I think we're now the market is at around $500, and you can get a fantastic trainer for $500. You probably don't
Hmm.
ever need to spend more than $500, and maybe that price keeps coming down. And I think every $100 you come down, you're just going to get more people to try indoor cycling. So
Right.
that was our motivation, to innovate on price, innovate on features as well, because the ride for us is a pretty flexible bike. It's not meant to be linked to a dedicated single trainer, right? It's meant to work with lots of other trainers.
Right.
So, and it looks a lot like a bicycle and not a spin bike. And just going back to your question around Peloton, we are seeing cyclists who chose Peloton probably because it was just so easy to buy, right? There are a lot of lazy
Or their
consumers.
their partner bought
Yeah.
one, their wife or their husband had one, so that's what they use.
That's my theory as well. Their partner probably bought it, and it's free for them to just get on Peloton. So they're using. But we are seeing some of the Peloton customers who are more of the cyclists wanting a slightly different experience, and they're coming on board, which is great to see. But we wanted to make it very easy for people to just get into indoor cycling and not have to do the research that customers had to do in the past about, like, oh, what do I need? I remember, oh, you have to buy this from Amazon, buy this from there, and it's just very ad hoc. It was like DIY project.
Totally. Yeah.
Yeah.
I just think it's the delta is going to be interesting to see, as far as hopefully some adoption with Zwift Ride, and then
Mm.
Peloton users realizing, oh, this is a real virtual world. It's not just a leaderboard and you're first or second or third. You're actually, your avatar is racing other people. It fundamentally is such a different experience. And when I talk to people, they say, oh, Zwift is like Peloton, and I'm like, you don't understand. It is it
Yeah.
is it is actually not like Peloton at all. And that, I think that's really, there's a lot there. And if folks realize the Zwift experience is so different,
Yeah.
maybe you'll get some new customers.
I think we need to not alienate people who are not considered like cycling enthusiasts. But I think the
Right.
right messaging is, if you like the idea of real outdoor cycling, then Zwift is probably the better experience. So
Good
then
way to put it.
yeah, you don't want to alienate
I'll
people,
use
right?
that.
Because they Yeah, rather than say, hey, I think the flip side is like people might view Zwift as like, oh, that's only for hardcore cyclists. And that's just not
which is
true.
intimidating, right?
Yes, yes.
You have invested so much time, I imagine so much capital into these sponsorships and your content franchises like Zwift Academy. And needless to say, the with sponsorship, I'm talking about the Tour de France Femmes avec Zwift, and
Mm-hmm.
just the women's tour over the last couple of years has just felt like a massive success, and you all are so front and center as far as that really like cultural event. I was just curious how you view those investments in sponsorship and content, and what effect has it had, kind of a halo effect on Zwift, and how do you look at it?
Well, I'll start by how the relationship started. It was
Great.
it started even well before COVID. I got to know the person who helps run the ASO organization, the group that and the family that owns the Tour de France. But it was COVID. I remember distinctly during COVID. I remember telling him, his name is Yann Lemoynier, saying, Tour de France is not going to happen this year. He didn't believe me. I said, March Madness is not going to happen. I am telling you, because I had already heard probably months before. It was like January of 2020, I want to say. January. My friend who had just come back from China, he said, holy shit, something big is about to happen. And those were early signs. And, February, I think it was, or at the end of January, I told Jan, I said, look, Tour de France is just not going to happen. We're going to, like, a lot of things will stop. And he didn't quite believe it. But then March Madness was canceled, and, many sporting events were canceled. And so it was in April, I think it was pretty clear to ASO that the Tour de France was not going to happen, or certainly wasn't going to happen in July. So that's when we started to talk about, well, maybe we could do something virtually. And guess what? We have a platform. What if we could bring all of the World Tour teams together and give something back to the public and to the sponsors, right? Put something on, put a show on. And so we started with a pilot, which was a charity event. It was a multi-day charity event in May. We were trying to raise money and awareness for Doctors Without Borders. So we said, let us help raise money. It's a great cause. Let's invite a number of World Tour teams, both men and women. And we insisted we had to have gender equality in terms of the number of teams, in terms of a number of stages, in terms of distance and prize money. ASO was bought into that. And we would bring broadcasters in to showcase bike racing when no bike races were happening at the time. So that went down pretty successfully. And then on the back of that, we said, well, look, the tour is not going to happen. And he agreed. So why don't we put a show on during the Tour de France, during the same weeks that the original Tour de France was planned to happen? Let's get all the broadcasters, give them something to, show for their sponsors and all the channels. But I said it's all contingent on us having the women's peloton. Again, same amount of coverage, same number of stages and distance and et cetera. And they bought into that. Here we are. This is during COVID. We put all our eggs in the basket of like showcasing Zwift to the world during the month of July. And that was a big risk for ASO. It was a big risk for us as well, right? What if something didn't work out, right? It was all on live television. I think it was 130 broadcasters around the world were covering this.
Wow. Yeah, I didn't realize that. Cool.
Yeah. So that was the beginning of our relationship with ASO. Of course, the tour did end up happening in September, but then, of course, on the back of, I think, the virtual Tour de France, it kind of renewed the pressure and the interest of many people to bring back the Women's Tour de France. So we just jumped on the opportunity of being the sponsor of the Women's Tour de France. And it all made sense for so many different reasons. We had done the virtual thing with AS already, and they had stopped doing the Women's Tour de France because commercially they couldn't make it work. They needed an anchor sponsor who was willing to invest in.
Was the last one like in the 90s or so? Was it like
It was back in the 80s, actually. I think the
Wow.
last
Yeah.
one
There's a great
might have.
documentary. The name is escaping me. Kate
Yes.
Verano from Zwift is featured in that, and we'll have to
Hmm.
show it. We'll have to start doing show notes for this episode. But fantastic documentary about
Yeah.
the origin story of the women's Tour de France.
Yeah, and back then they would have the women's Tour de France on the same exact days as the men's, on the same stage. So it's just shortened. So
Hmm.
they would start, let's say halfway into the men's race, and they would finish sometime, I forget, before afterwards. Logistically, it's amazing that they even pulled it off. The difference here is that we would do it as a separate event altogether. And if you do it separately, then they can monetize the commercials around the event. When you have a women's event that happens on the same day as the men's event, it's just very, very hard to charge
Hmm.
the same sponsor more for the event.
Hmm.
So, of
Yeah.
course, I can understand why they couldn't make it work commercially.
That is such a good insight. I mean, it's so basic, right? It's how do you monetize if you're looping it in together?
That's
Very
right.
interesting.
That's right.
Yeah.
And that's why the the original, well, the first version of the Women's Tour de France avec Zwift happened on the same day as the final stage of the men's race in Paris. But the problem with that is that they can't ask for, it's hard to monetize it when the men's are happening the same day. So you kind of have to throw it. Anyway, the point is you have to have a separate start, separate finish, and separate set of sponsors. Maybe it's the same sponsors, but they're going to pay more because they're getting more air coverage. So far, look, we're 3 years into it. We're super excited about the investment. I think it's more than just an investment for Zwift. I mean, we feel like what we've done, especially with the slogan "Watch the Femmes," it's more of a movement, and it's not just about the Tour de France. It's about women's sports and equality and women's pay and women's sports. I think across many disciplines, very exciting. Women's basketball, super exciting. Women's football, very exciting. And this past season, the women's Tour de France was super exciting. It all happened in the last kilometer of a 8-stage event. This is fantastic.
A lot of drama for those that don't know. It might go watch some highlights because I mean, we were on the edge of our seats there. But just to hear you say with the hashtag and how you're going about with some of the messaging that somewhat deliberately you're really creating the groundswell for a movement. That's really how it feels. And by the way, just as a bit of an aside, I spent some time on the Zwift Instagram before the interview, and a lot of the content is female centric content, like a
Yeah.
majority of it. And I don't know if that's deliberate or I guess it kind of makes sense with the sponsorship, but it's really cool to see because yeah, and
We
I don't know
definitely.
how the genders break down in
Yeah.
usership and stuff like that, but
Yeah.
it's neat.
We're not 50-50%, but we're definitely trying to make sure that the messaging, is pretty equal. Yeah, we do sponsor the Canyon SRAM women's team, among others,
Right.
actually, the Phoenix team. We sponsor the FDJ team as well. Yeah, this is just a lot of excitement around women's sports in general. And so for us, it's so important as a brand to continue to invest in these women's properties. Zwift Academy, we started Zwift Academy with the women's side, and I
I did
think,
not know that.
yeah, we started with the Ken Schramm team, and then eventually we started with Dimension Data on the men's side. And then a few years ago, we went with Alpecin. And so, yeah, we've done many things with the women's peloton first, which look from a business perspective, that's where the opportunities as well, because the breakdown is probably 70 or 75% men and 25% women. It aligns with our business opportunity.
Well, and it's also just back to your point about women's sports being really exciting. Over the last couple of years, it's like everyone's coming around to it and be like, oh, there's a ton of money on the table. Like this, like Eric Min and Zwift are getting in early on what is a up and to the right curve in attention and awareness and people buying stuff, buying tickets, buying merchandise, and
Yeah.
it's just so exciting. It's like finally.
Cycling is really hard to monetize as a team owner. It's very, very difficult, but I can tell you that we definitely have contributed in helping the women's pay grade go up, massively. So the minimum wages have gone up, and of course, the UCI has been under a lot of pressure to help regulate that in terms of
And
setting
that's
a minimum
through
wage.
exposure in the women's tour. Is that how does that work?
I think it all helps. I mean, really, if you want to invest in one race, it is the women's. It is the Tour de France, right?
Right.
You ask anyone on the street, they will have heard Tour de France. You ask them to name a second race, they won't know. So
Right.
I think the Tour de France is giving a lot of exposure, and it's given a lot of sponsors a reason to invest in women's sports also, because you get great value. You could be a major sponsor of the women's peloton versus be a very small sponsor of the men's peloton. So there's some
That's,
real opportunities. But look, the wages have gone up tremendously. You're hearing rumors of some of these top women professionals earning nearly €1 million a year. That's just an incredible. I mean, look, it still has a long way to go to match the men's peloton, but from where it's come from in the last 3 years alone, it's massive.
yeah, awesome. And then back to the Zwift Academy, I was really struck on this last season of how it felt to me, and I'm generally aware about metrics and this power output and watts per kilogram and all that stuff, but it sounds like this class was just like off the charts. I mean, just so strong when you compare them to years past. And we're talking about 12 months, we're talking about 24 months, and the talent that you've curated through this thing just seems absurd and next level. So I was hoping you could just comment about that, your observations on planting the seeds of the academy and seeing it grow.
So we can't take credit for the athletic abilities these contestants have. I mean, they are gifted athletes. But what we can take credit for is casting the net very wide and making it available to just about anyone to enter the contest and become a professional cyclist. And look, not all of them have worked out, but we have found some real gem. I mean, Neve Bradbury, she is she's considered one of the top climbers in the world right now, and she was the winner in, I think, 2020. The same year Jay Vines won on the men's side, and Jay Vine is, he's probably on a million plus. Yeah, he's on €1 million plus contract. So had he not won Zwift Academy, he would have retired. He would have quit and got a desk job somewhere. So I think those are great stories, right? It gives hope, and I don't think we've found the last of the best. I think we will find great talent over the coming years, and I do believe one of them will end up being winners of the Tour de France. And they may come from very unconventional sports, but I think that the best athletes are in cycling is just being, I think, naive. Like, there are lots of athletes in lots of other sports.
Right. So my little take on this is that in this last season, the irony was that the coaches were more excited about the younger guy. Obviously he was incredibly fit, incredible talent, but literally did not have that many years on the bike, and that was good with them. So my point here is that you can be an incredible Zwift athlete, you can have an incredible engine and numbers, and you can get on the show and you can be a contestant, and then you can join a pro team and they'll teach you some of the basics, cornering, and descending. It was just fascinating. It's like they're looking for the raw talent that's 19 years old. Like that was pretty clear from the show.
I think they are pulling from the youth talent. It is a big step. If you don't have a few years of racing experience under your belt, and then to throw them into World Tour is very difficult. And so that's why most of them are entering into their development program. And the way the UCI, the governing body, they allow these riders to float between the World Tour program, the Pro Tour event. Not domestic. These are still international events. It's just a lower category. It's just not World Tour. So Some of these riders have the ability, well, they start with the lower profile events, which are still very, very competitive. And then if they perform, they can go straight into the World Tour events. I think that's great because, look, you can't be expected to just jump in and do well in these World Tour peloton. It's just very, very competitive. It's very fast, and you need great skills, and there are crashes. It's inevitable. But someone like Neve Bradbury, is the poster child on the women's side. She went from an 18-year-old, I think, winner, and now at 22, 23, she is, I would say, like top 10 in the world, which is fantastic. It's amazing.
Unreal. We haven't talked about 10 years of building a community, 10 years of hundreds of thousands, millions of people that are riding together online. This was what you cited as one of the main inspirations for starting Zwift. You missed having people to ride with when you moved to London. Just open-ended question. What does this mean to you? And do you have any anecdotes about maybe relationships that you've built from afar or people that you met in real life that just have kind of stuck with you?
Yeah, I've had this conversation with one of my co-founders, John Mayfield, just last week, and we talk a lot about community and building communities, but the truth is that we're there just to support the communities. Communities are the ones who are building their community. And there are lots of communities. I mean, as an example, we have about 50,000 clubs, and half of our content, I think, about 4 million events were created by our community. So they are creating their own community. Some of them are very big, some of them are very small, and they're creating content for themselves and to share with the broader community. So I think it's probably not correct to say that we build the community. No, like they are using our platform to build the community that they want, and we're just there to support them and build tools for them to make it easier. Because I think that should be the focus of our responsibility, to make it easier for them to come together.
And you had mentioned, I think previously, that you had some plans for product roadmap features to facilitate more for the clubs, more for these communities. Are there any on the top of your mind that you could share?
I mean, we do have club features, and it's the most basic tools for community where they can organize themselves, they can create events, and I think there's a lot more there we can do. There are communication tools that we should offer to our community right now. For example, the chat message within clubs is a bit noisy, and so just simple things like nested postings and tagging, basic tools that you would see in more sophisticated social tools. Those are the obvious things that we need to invest in, and definitely more features around events. I think one of the more requested feature is a group workout that they could do within a club. I think that would be great. Another one that I would love for us to do, and it's just not prioritized, is like fighting for the global calendar slot. That's highly coveted. And there are a lot of clubs who've had events on the global calendar for many, many years. And, it's not easy for us to take that away unless it's just performing poorly. But wouldn't it be great if we had some sort of system that is based on popularity, right? And so if you happen to have great, content, you bid on it, and we have a whole bidding system that allows you to get your content to surface to the wider community. So those are like the kind of search discovery tools and communication tools that I think we need to invest in.
Yeah, and I think another one that I'm selfishly going to ask about is custom jerseys. We're getting hill climbers jerseys made for the podcast, and like literally, on my ZRL team, they're asking, Sam, can you ask Eric Min, can we get these custom jerseys? So that's my feature request I'm sharing with you.
That is one of the most highly requested feature from the community. And we are making many more jerseys, but there are a couple of things. One is like just the intake process and trying to streamline that, because eventually it has to make its way into the game. But right now, it's not something that you could just drop into a store and then just suddenly pop up. We are making those investments now, and it should be coming online soon. But the other, and probably the more important one, is all the artwork is being created by our own team, so we're the bottleneck, and we're doing that deliberately because we care about the quality of the kits. We don't want just any kit to make into the game, because that is part of the brand then, and we
Yeah.
have to be careful about that. And also, at the very least, we need to review it, right? We don't know what someone might put on the kit that could be offensive, right? But we are going to have more kits, and I would say if you have not put in a request, I would put the request in as soon as possible.
Okay. All right. I will. Another just I guess specific question before we wrap up. You've introduced steering into the game, and I was just curious how much you think that's going to be a factor moving forward. I do not have a steering controller. It benefits you to have one because you can move into someone's draft easier, and that is definitely a incremental advantage in racing.
So if you have steering and you are descending, for example, you can have a pretty big advantage cutting the corners, and you can instantly put seconds on someone who's right behind you. They have two problems if they don't have steering. They can't get on your wheel, and they can't take they can't cut the corners. And because of that, you have a distinct advantage. And I hear people complaining that it's unfair, but like, hey, not everything is fair. If you really care about your performance, then get some sort of steering device. And it's not limited to just our steering device. There are third-party steering devices that you can purchase. And I do think that eventually we'll get to a point, and I don't think it'll take that long, where almost everyone will have steering, because it will just another element of gamification that keeps you engaged and keeps you focused. So yeah, I'd say we are coming out with strategies on how we can get everyone some sort of steering device.
Cool. And thank you. I mean, that was a big question mark I had about the game. And just to wrap up here, you have had a successful career doing a number of different things, including co-founding Zwift and launching it successfully and running it for 10 years. Do you consider some of the similarities between entrepreneurship and bike racing? And if you do, what are some of your favorite reflections or insights?
Well, I think what's similar is just it's so hard, and it takes time, right? It takes dedication, it takes endurance, and on the entrepreneurship side, when people approach me and say, "Hey, I'm thinking of doing a startup," I ask them, "Are you sure you want to do a startup?" Because it might take 5 years for you to figure out it actually, like, you have something that works. It might take 10 years before it actually is a successful business. So do you have the stomach to go through that? And I think the same is true for bike racing. Like, unless you're a freak and you're just incredibly talented, then you start winning the first year you race, it takes a long time and dedication. Many times you want to quit as a bike rider. It's the same thing as with being an entrepreneur. It takes endurance, it takes conviction, it takes a lot of hard work to make something happen. And even then, it may not pan out, just like in cycling. So I think you go into it hoping to believe that it's going to work. And look, I know a lot of people who have dedicated their lives to becoming a professional cyclist, and I'd say 99% of the time it hasn't worked out for them. And that's the same for entrepreneurship. You need to have that dedication, and you're willing to sacrifice and hurt and be in a lot of pain. But some come through that and become professional cyclists or elite amateur or Olympian, or you have a successful startup. But it takes a long time. So you got to be able to endure.
Yeah, that's a great answer, man. Thank you so much. And we are out of time. So Eric Min, I mean, this has been my pleasure. I can't tell you how much I appreciate you making time. You're very busy, and how much I appreciate what you built with Zwift.
Yeah, well, thank you for having me. It's been a lot of fun. Yeah, it's a lot of fun walking down memory lane. Thank you.
Good, good. I'm glad. Yeah. Cheers.